Welcome back to another Roblox Studio tutorial. In today's video, I'm going to show you how you can send a message through the chat system whenever a player dies. So let me go ahead and kill my character, and then you can see what happens in the chat system. Okay, so when I kill my player, then it says my username has died. Alright, so let's go ahead and see how we can do this in Roblox Studio. Okay, so just like my other chat system video, this is going to be divided into two parts, with part of it being on the server side and the other part being on the client side. We're going to start on the server side, and since we're sending things between the server and the client, we're going to be using remote events. So we're going to start by going under replicated storage, clicking on the plus sign, and then adding a remote event. Then under the server script service, we're going to click the plus sign and add a script. The first thing we're going to do inside the script is create variables for the replicated storage and also for the remote event. So for the first one, we're going to say local replicated storage. And this is just a variable name, so shorten it if you want to. This is going to be equal to game, get service. Inside the parentheses, we're going to put replicated storage. Then we're going to create a variable for the remote event. So we'll say local remote event, and this is going to be equal to replicated storage, since that's where it's stored. And then we're going to say wait for child, and inside the parentheses we're going to put remote event. The next thing we're going to do is create a couple different functions. The first one is going to look for players to join the game, and then once a player joins the game, it's going to be looking at the player's character to see when it dies. We're going to start that by saying game, get service. Inside the parentheses, we're going to put players. Then we're going to say dot player added. Then we're going to say connect. Inside the parentheses, we're going to connect this with another function. So we'll say function. Inside this function, we're going to pass player. So this parameter here comes from the player added event. Inside of this function, we're going to say player dot character added. And then when the character gets added, we're going to connect this with another function. Inside this function, we're going to pass the character. So this parameter right here comes from the character added event. Now inside of this function, we're going to say character, wait for child. Inside here, we're going to put humanoid. And then we're going to say dot died. So this will be when the character dies. And we're going to connect this with one final function. So inside the parentheses, we're going to put function one more time. Inside of this function, we're not going to pass any parameters, but instead we're going to trigger the remote event by saying remote event, fire client. Inside the parentheses, we need to start by telling it which client, and that'll be player, which comes from this up here. And then we're also going to pass the player's name by saying player.name. So this looks a little bit confusing, but basically all this is doing is first it's waiting for a player to join the game, and then it's getting the character from the player, and then from the character it's looking at the humanoid and waiting for it to die. And then once that player dies, what it's going to do is trigger a remote event for that particular client. So that handles everything we need to do on the server side. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the client side. So what we're going to do under starter player, and then under starter player scripts, we're going to add a local script. And then on this local script, we're going to start with the replicated storage and also the remote event. So rather than type it again, what we can do is we can come back to this script and just copy the first two lines. Next, what we're going to do is create a function that sends a message through the chat system whenever it receives this remote event. So what we're going to do is we're going to say local function. The name of our function can be death alert. Inside the parentheses, we're going to pass player name. So this player name right here is going to come from the remote event from this part right here. Okay, before we get started with this function, we're going to define one thing outside the function, and that's going to be the text color. So we're going to say text color is going to be equal to brick color dot new. And inside the parentheses, you can put your color. I'm going to use really red. Now that we have the text color, we can work on the rest of the message. To do that inside the function, we're going to say game dot starter GUI colon, set core. Inside the parentheses, we're going to start by saying chat, and then make, then system message. And then outside the quotation mark, we're going to put a comma, and then a curly bracket. And then with your cursor still inside the curly brackets, you're going to press enter. And then you can press it a couple times to give us some space. The first thing we're going to do inside the curly brackets is define the message. So that's going to be text is equal to. And then for the message, we want to include the player's name, and then the message has died. So what we'll do is we'll start by saying player name. And then we're going to join this by doing dot dot. And then we're going to be joining this with another string, so we're going to put quotation marks. We'll do one space to space out the user's name and the new message. And then for the new message, we're going to say has died. And then at the end, we'll put a semicolon. Next, we're going to define the font. So we'll say font is equal to enum.font. And basically what this means is there's a lot of different options for font. So by saying enum.font, we're just choosing one from that font list. So from this font list, you can choose whatever font you want to. I'm just going to stick with the default for now. So I'm going to say source sans bold. Next, we're going to define the color. And that's going to be equal to text color, which is what we defined up here. And then from that, we're going to get its color code. Then we'll say font size is equal to enum dot font size. So just like before, there's a lot of different font sizes, and by using enum, we're just choosing one. And then we're going to say dot size, and the default is 24, but you can either go bigger or smaller if you want to. And then for these 3 lines, I forgot to put the semicolon, so we'll just add that now. And then we'll just clean things up by removing the extra space. And finally, we want to connect this function to the remote event. And we can do that at the bottom by saying remote event dot on client event. And then we're going to connect this with our function. All right, so let's go ahead and check it out and make sure we didn't make any mistakes. Okay, so if I go ahead and kill my player, then I see in the chat system it says my username and then has died. If you're testing in Studio and you want to know how I killed my player, then down here in the command bar, you just put game.players, and then your username, and then it'll be .character, and then .humanoid, .health, and then you want to set that equal to 0. Okay, and before we end with this video, like we did for the other one, let's go to the local script and just change some of the options so you know what everything does. So like I mentioned before, this is how you set your text color. So if we want something other than red, we can change that right here. So let's do blue instead. This part right here is the text that gets sent through the chat system. So you can change that. So let's say we just want to say username and then died. We can do that by doing something like this. This line right here is how you can change the font style. So let's go ahead and try a different font. Let's try cartoon. This line right here just sets the color based on whatever you put up here. So there's nothing to change on that line. And then finally for this line is how you change the font size. So let's try a bigger font and try 96. Now let's go ahead and run the game and we can take a look at the changes. So now if I kill my character, and after I kill my character, I see it still appears in the chat system, but it just has some different properties now. Alright, so that's going to be the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed, and stay tuned for the next one.